The mountain held its secret for 75 years. Then, on a clear day in 1999, a climber saw something wrong. A patch of white. Too white for snow, too smooth for rock. He moved closer. His heart pounded in the thin air. It was a body, frozen solid, face down, as if embracing the mountain that killed him. His arms were raised, broken, clawing at the unforgiving stone. The wind had ripped his clothes away over the decades, exposing a back as white as marble. His skin wasn't skin anymore. It was porcelain, perfectly preserved by 75 years of absolute cold. A snapped rope was still tied to his waist, a ghost tethered to his final violent moment. They checked the name tags on his tattered shirt. G. Mallory. The world stopped. This was George Mallory, the man who flew too close to the sun, the icon who walked into the clouds and never came out. He and his partner, Andrew Irvin, were last seen on June 8, 1924. Two tiny figures pushing against an ocean of white. They were just 800 feet from the summit, the highest any man had ever climbed. Then the clouds swallowed them, and they were gone, erased from the world. For 3/4 of a century, one question haunted the world of exploration. Did they make it? Did George Mallory stand on the roof of the world 29 years before anyone else? Did he conquer the beast before it claimed him? Finding his body was supposed to provide the answer, but it only created more questions. His snow goggles were in his pocket. You don't take your goggles off in a blinding blizzard unless you're descending at night. Did that mean he was coming down after reaching the top? The proof would have been in his camera, a small Kodak vest pocket camera. He promised to leave a picture of his wife on the summit. If the camera was found, the film could be developed. The truth would be revealed. But the camera was not on his body. It was gone. This isn't just a story of a lost climber. It's a cold case written in ice and stone, a puzzle of thin air, broken ropes, and a man's burning obsession. To join us as we piece together the final, fatal hours of this expedition, subscribe to the channel right now. To understand how a legend was lost, we have to go back. Back to the one critical mistake that sealed their fate before they even took their first step on the mountain. The mistake wasn't a broken rope or a faulty map. It was an infection in their minds, a single, burning obsession that had festered for years. They had to be first. The world was watching. In his tent, lit by a flickering lantern, Mallory would read letters and newspaper clippings that were months old. Will Mallory finally conquer Everest? The empire's hopes rest on one man. He imagined the parades if he succeeded, but he was haunted by the shame of returning to London empty-handed for a third time. He could already feel the cold silence of the lecture halls, the polite but disappointed questions. This shame was a physical weight, heavier than any pack. And then there were the rivals. He had nightmares of a Swiss climber standing on the summit, waving a flag that wasn't his. He heard rumors of an American team with better funding and new equipment, ready to snatch his prize. The mountain had become a ticking clock, and every gust of wind sounded like laughter from his competitors. This wasn't an expedition anymore. It was a war fought at 28,000 feet, and George Mallory was losing. This pressure poisoned his judgment. It made him make a choice that baffled every veteran climber in the camp, a fatal choice. For the final, desperate push to the summit, he needed a partner. The logical choice was Noel Odell, a seasoned geologist and a brilliant, steady, high-altitude climber. But Mallory didn't choose Odell. He chose the youngest, most inexperienced man on the team, 22-year-old Andrew "Sandy" Irvin. Irvin was an Oxford rowing champion, impossibly strong and full of youthful optimism, but he was a complete novice in the death zone. He looked at Mallory with pure hero worship, never questioning his decisions. The other climbers were stunned. The expedition leader, Edward Norton, took Mallory aside. "George, the boy isn't ready. You know this. His body isn't acclimated. Take Odell." Mallory's eyes, hollowed out by exhaustion and altitude, were fixed on the summit. "Odell is cautious," he replied, his voice raspy. "I need someone who will follow, not question. Irvin is strong, he trusts me, and he can fix the oxygen." He was choosing a loyal mechanic over a cautious mountaineer. He was betting their lives that the machines would be more important than the men. And these machines were terrifying. They weren't sleek systems. They were heavy, awkward contraptions of steel, leather, and canvas, weighing over 30 pounds each. The weight was high on their backs, constantly threatening to throw them off balance on the narrow, icy ridges. They were known to leak precious oxygen into the empty air. The regulators would freeze solid without warning. Just days earlier, another climber testing a set had suddenly collapsed, ripping the mask off his face, his skin turning a deathly blue, gasping for air like a drowning man. It took him an hour to recover. Irvin had found the cause, a single frozen valve, a tiny piece of ice that had nearly killed a man. He promised he had fixed it, that he had modified all the sets. But how could you trust a machine that a single ice crystal could turn into a coffin? The team argued with Mallory. They presented the evidence. The gear was a liability. It would fail when they needed it most. But Mallory wouldn't listen. The obsession had taken root. He saw the oxygen not as a risk, but as their only advantage, their silver bullet against the impossible. His madness was becoming clear to everyone but him. His hands trembled constantly, not from cold, but from a feverish energy. He barely ate. The mountain itself was sending warnings. The Sherpas, men who understood the rhythms of the ice, refused to go any higher. They pointed to the summit, where a plume of cloud was forming, a sign they called the White Cobra. It meant a storm was coming, a killer storm. They made offerings at their small stone altars, praying for the two Englishmen who were walking to their deaths. They saw it not as bravery, but as a fatal disrespect to the mountain goddess, Chomolungma. The wind changed its tune, howling through the camps with a new, menacing pitch. Norton tried one last time. "George, wait one more day, just one day. The mountain isn't ready." But Mallory only looked up. He saw the summit, deceptively close in the thin air. He saw history. He saw redemption. He couldn't see the grave waiting for him. His response was cold and final. "We're going." There was no more debate. So they packed light, dangerously light. Just enough oxygen for a direct, lightning-fast assault. No extra food, no sleeping bags, no shelter, no room for delays, no margin for error, no chance for rescue if something went wrong. On the morning of June 8, 1924, George Mallory and Sandy Irvin left the highest camp on Earth. The cold was a physical presence that stole the breath from their lungs and burned their skin. Every piece of metal they touched felt like a hot iron. They strapped the monstrous oxygen sets to their backs. The hiss of the gas in their masks was the only sound besides the wind. They gave a final wave to Noel Odell, who would be watching from below. Then they turned their backs on safety, on reason, and on the world. They walked into a sea of clouds, two men chasing a ghost, about to become ghosts themselves. The clouds swallowed them whole. One moment they were on a mountain, the next they were nowhere. The world vanished. There was no up, no down, just a swirling, freezing gray void. The wind was a constant scream. It tore at their clothes and tried to rip them from the rock. Every step was a guess. Every breath was a fight. The thin air was a poison, slowly shutting down their bodies and their minds. And then his own world went dark. Irvin's oxygen set started to choke. The steady hiss of life-giving gas sputtered, became irregular. Mallory watched his partner, the younger man, fumbling with the frozen valves. His fingers were too numb. His brain was too starved of oxygen to solve the problem. They were wasting time. They were wasting air. Mallory felt a surge of anger. He tugged hard on the rope connecting them. a silent, desperate command. Move faster. The rope wasn't a lifeline anymore. It was a chain, tying him to a failing man. And then, his own world went dark. The moisture from his breath froze instantly on the inside of his goggles. He was blind. He ripped them off, and the wind felt like a razor blade against his eyes. He pushed on, climbing by feel alone. The paranoia of high altitude began its work. The rock face morphed. Mallory saw his wife's face in the stone, her expression pleading. He shook his head, trying to clear the image, but it stayed. Irvin heard voices in the wind, whispering his name, telling him to turn back. They were climbing through a dream, a nightmare. They reached the second step, a 90-foot wall of sheer black rock. In this air, at this height, it was not a climb, it was a death sentence. To even attempt it was madness. Mallory, the expert climber, looked up. His body was screaming at him to stop. His lungs burned. His muscles had nothing left. But the summit was just beyond it. He could feel it. The obsession that had driven him across the world, that had pushed him up this frozen monster 3 times, was now in complete control. He started to climb. His fingers were numb claws. He couldn't feel the rock, only the deep, aching cold. He swung his ice axe. It sparked against the stone, finding no purchase. He was climbing on pure will. Below them, Noel Odell waited. He stared into the white wall of cloud that had consumed his friends. For hours, nothing, just the howl of the wind. He was preparing to descend, to assume the worst. And then it happened. The clouds ripped open. For just 5 minutes, a window appeared. Odell frantically raised his binoculars. He scanned the ridge, and he saw them. 2 tiny black dots, unbelievably high. They were at the base of the final pyramid. One of them was moving onto the rock. They were going for it. They were so close. Odell felt a surge of pure victory. They had done it. The British flag would fly on the roof of the world. He was ready to shout, to cheer into the wind. He was witnessing history, the first man to conquer Everest. And then the clouds slammed shut. The window closed. The mountain took them back. That was the last time George Mallory and Sandy Irvin were ever seen alive. The black dots vanished. The radio went silent. The hope died. Their descent had begun, not down the rock face, but into legend, into silence. The oxygen would have run out first. The hiss in the mask would stop. The silence would be terrifying. A final, desperate gulp of thin, useless air. The lungs would burn. For a moment, the mind would become crystal clear. A single horrifying thought: we are dead. Then the fog would roll in, not just from the outside, but from within. The strength would go, the inability to lift an arm, to take a step. The cold would finally win, seeping into the core. The confusion would give way to a strange, peaceful calm as the brain freezes. They were alone in the death zone, with no one to help, no way down, just the endless, crushing indifference of the ice and the rock. They had gambled everything, and the mountain had won. For 2 days, Noel Odell searched. He pushed his body into the death zone, alone. He climbed higher than any sane man would dare, screaming their names into the wind. The only answer was the howl of the jet stream, mocking him. The mountain was a tomb, utterly silent. He found their highest camp, a tiny canvas tent flapping violently against the rock. It was untouched, a silent testament to a journey with no return. Further up, he found a single oxygen bottle, discarded in the snow, a clue. It meant they had pushed on, confident or desperate. But he found no men, just the crushing, infinite emptiness. Down below at base camp, hope rotted into dread. Every man was a statue, their eyes fixed on the summit, scanning the rock face for a signal that would never come. The silence from the radio was an answer. It was an executioner's verdict. When Odell finally descended, his face a mask of frost and failure, no words were needed. The expedition was over. The mountain had won. The news crawled down the mountain, by runner, then by wire. London, New York. The world learned the names, George Mallory and Sandy Irvin. They weren't just dead, they were gone, vanished. For 75 years they haunted Everest. They became the ultimate mystery, a ghost story told in hushed tones at every base camp. Every climber who followed looked for them. Hillary and Tenzing, after their own triumph, were asked about Mallory. Had they seen any sign? The mountain was no longer just a challenge of rock and ice. It was a graveyard. It held a secret. Then, in 1999, a new kind of expedition arrived. They were hunters. Their goal was not the summit. Their goal was a body. Led by climber Conrad Anker, they began a grid search, moving like detectives across a vast, frozen crime scene. The search area was a treacherous slope of broken, yellow rock, a place where a single misstep meant a 10,000-foot fall. For weeks, they found nothing, just rock, just ice. The task felt impossible. And then, Anker saw it, a patch of white. It was different from the surrounding snow, too white, too smooth. It looked like marble. He moved off from the search line, his heart pounding against his ribs. He was afraid of what he was about to find. He got closer. It wasn't marble. It was a human back, a body frozen into the scree, face down. The arms were spread wide, the fingers dug into the mountain as if trying to stop a fall. The wind had shredded the clothing over decades, revealing skin preserved by the brutal cold. It was shockingly, unnaturally white. Anker knelt, feeling like he was trespassing on sacred ground. He gently searched the tattered remains of the collar. He found a name tag. The letters were faded, but legible. G. Mallory. The ghost had a name. The legend was flesh and bone. The body was a storybook of a final, violent struggle. A severe rope jerk injury was visible around his waist. The force had been incredible. It spoke of a sudden, catastrophic fall. One man plunging, the other desperately trying to hold on, the rope snapping tight like a guitar string, and then breaking. His leg was shattered, a compound fracture. He would have been alive after the fall, but immobilized, helpless, left to watch the sky darken and feel the cold seep into his core. The most tantalizing clue was in his pocket, his snow goggles. Why would they be in his pocket? The glare at that altitude is blinding. You cannot function without them. Unless it was dark. Unless he was descending long after the sun had set. This single detail screamed a possibility. They were late coming down. And the only reason to be that late was a delay on the summit. They searched his pockets for the one thing that could prove it. The photograph of his wife, Ruth. He had promised to leave it on the roof of the world. It wasn't there. But the ultimate prize was missing, the camera. The vest pocket Kodak camera that could rewrite history. And the camera was with Andrew Irvin, the younger man, the engineer, the one tasked with documenting the triumph. But where was Irvin? Mallory's body pointed to a fall. Did Irvin fall with him? Was he swept into a crevasse, buried under a century of snow? His body has never been found. He is the key. He holds the proof. The mountain took Mallory, but it hid Irvin. It kept the final secret for itself. So the mystery didn't end in 1999. It exploded. Finding Mallory gave us a man, but it took away the simple story. It replaced a clean disappearance with a violent, desperate end. It gave us clues that only led to more profound questions. Did they stand on the summit, two specters in the wind, 29 years before the world would know it was possible. Or did their ambition carry them too high into a final fatal trap? George Mallory's body remains on Everest, a frozen sentinel guarding the world's greatest mountaineering secret. The mountain let them touch the heavens, but it never, ever let them go. The search for Andrew Irvin is not a search for a man, it is a hunt for a ghost. Every year, new expeditions, armed with drones and ground-penetrating radar, scour the treacherous slopes of Everest's north face. They are detectives on the world's largest, most dangerous crime scene. They scan the Yellow Band, a distinctive layer of rock where Mallory fell. They probe crevasses deep enough to swallow buildings. They are looking for a body, yes, but they are really looking for a small black box, the vest pocket Kodak camera that Irvin carried. That camera is the holy grail of mountaineering. Inside, a roll of celluloid film, perfectly preserved by the deep freeze of the death zone. That film is a time capsule. It could hold the single most important photograph in exploration history, an image of George Mallory standing on the roof of the world 29 years before anyone thought it was possible. Or it could show a landscape of failure, a final desperate shot before the darkness took them. The camera is everything. It is the truth, frozen in silver nitrate, waiting for the light of day. But the mountain is a jealous guardian. Every year, the snowpack shifts. Avalanches scour the slopes, burying clues, moving bodies, erasing history. The hunt for Irvine is a race against the mountain itself. Finding Mallory's body didn't end the mystery. It ignited a war. A war fought not with ice axes, but with evidence and belief. On one side, you have the romantics, the believers. They say Mallory was the finest climber of his generation, a man possessed by an unbreakable will. They point to the evidence like prosecutors. Exhibit A, the snow goggles, found tucked safely in his pocket. Why would he take them off in the blinding glare of the high Himalayas? The only logical answer, it was dark. He was descending at night. And the only reason to be that high, that late, is because you were delayed on the summit, celebrating a victory. Exhibit B, the photograph of his wife, Ruth. He promised her he would leave it on the summit. It was not found on his body. For the believers, this is not a missing item. It is a fulfilled promise, a sacred offering left on the highest altar on earth. They argue that his ambition was a force of nature, and that on that day it was stronger than the mountain. On the other side of the war are the pragmatists, the skeptics. They look at the same evidence and see a different story. They see a story of failure, not triumph. They point to the second step, a 90-foot sheer cliff of rock that stands as the final gatekeeper to the summit. In 1999, Conrad Anker, the very man who found Mallory's body, was the first to free climb that section. He later said he didn't believe Mallory could have done it with the primitive equipment of 1924. The skeptics argued that the mountain was simply too much. The oxygen sets were unreliable, the clothing was inadequate. They believe Mallory and Irvin reached the base of that final obstacle and were turned back. That the goggles in the pocket were not a sign of a late descent, but of a desperate retreat in a whiteout blizzard where vision was useless anyway. They believe the missing photograph was simply lost in the violent, bone-shattering fall that killed him. For them, it is a tragedy of overreach, a story of two men who flew too close to the sun and were burned. Two stories, two possibilities. Both end with two men dying alone in the freezing dark. George Mallory's body remains on Everest. For years, it lay uncovered, a frozen sentinel on the main climbing route. Climbers on their own summit push would pass him, a chilling, white marble statue reminding them of the price of failure, or the price of victory. His presence was a silent, eternal question mark. In recent years, his body has been respectfully moved and covered with stones, but he is still there. He is part of the mountain now. The mountain is the only witness. It saw what happened. It knows the truth. But it keeps its secrets. It took Mallory's life, but it hid Irvin's body. It gave us a legend, but it kept the proof. The mystery of George Mallory is not about whether he died. It's about how he lived his final moments. Was it in triumph, having touched the sky? Or in despair, swallowed by an ambition that took him one step too far? We may never know. The answer remains frozen in ice, locked away with a man the world is still searching for. The mountain let them touch the heavens, but it never, ever let them go. So, what do you believe? Are you with the romantics who think he stood on top of the world, or the pragmatists who believe the mountain defeated him? Tell us your theory in the comments below. This is one of many mysteries we investigate. To make sure you don't miss the next journey into the unknown, subscribe to the channel.